you write anything the other night?
Stay up to 4.
Huh?
All right, so we're going to finish with this class today, and then next week we'll start our new book, Reaching Out by Henry Nouwen. It's available on Amazon. I'll talk more about Nouwen next week, but he's kind of one of the classical spiritual writers. Interesting gentleman, Roman Catholic priest. It's an older book. He died 70s or 80s, maybe? I don't know. He's been dead a while. But it's a good kind of solid spirituality book. So we'll start that. If you want to read, probably, I would say the introduction, chapter 1 would be sufficient.
Get that done before you leave, maybe?
Will we finish the book? That's a good question.
Yeah, I'm not real optimistic.
Well, I just have to say, I'm retiring whether the book's done or not.
Stick a fork, I'm done.
All right, so today I thought we would just spend our time kind of recapping and wrapping up the last few weeks of what we've done. I kind of made a summary slide for each of the weeks, but I'm happy to do a different format if you just have questions, if you kind of want to hit the highlights from each week and let that bring up questions. So I'm good for whatever works for y'all.
I have one question that really wasn't any of the chapters, and that is about confirmation. I'd just like to hear more about what it means to be confirmed in the Episcopal Church.
Okay, so confirmation is in the prayer book, 413, somewhere in there. So confirmation is kind of an interesting sacrament. It's, page 413 is where it is in the prayer book. Part of understanding confirmation begins with understanding baptism. So baptism, with the 1979 prayer book, the Episcopal Church kind of recovered a more ancient understanding and practice of baptism. So that baptism now is full initiation and membership into the church. So it's always been a rite of initiation, but it always seemed to lack something. Like, so when I was a kid and I was baptized, I was a member of the church, but I couldn't have communion until I was confirmed. And so the older practice and the older understanding is that baptism is full membership and initiation into the church. Nothing else needs to be done. And then confirmation is really exactly what it says. It's confirming what has already happened. It doesn't give you something you don't have, and it doesn't give you a little bit more than what you already have. Right? It's the confirmation of what was already done. And so it happens in a couple of ways. One of the ways is, especially for children who are baptized as babies, or younger children who may not remember their baptism, for whom the baptismal vows were made by parents and godparents rather than the individual being baptized. It's the opportunity for that individual to claim and confirm for themselves the vows that were made on their behalf. Does that make sense? So confirmation can only be done by a bishop. Priests cannot confirm. Right? The older practice in the ancient church was really that the bishop did everything. The bishop was the guy, and was always a guy back then, who did everything within the diocese. Right? Presbyters or priests came about later on as the church began to grow, and the bishops needed help in meeting pastoral and sacramental needs of the people within the diocesan job. So in the Eastern Church, Eastern Orthodoxy today, the bishop still baptizes and confirms, but the priest can do that as well. In our tradition, in the Western Church, the priest can baptize, but only the bishop can confirm. Right? Some have kind of kiddingly, there may be some truth in this, said, well, they got to have something to do. And so it was kind of reserving a little piece of their authority and their sacramental presence that was different from the priests. Maybe that's true, maybe it's not, I don't know. But it represents for us, as I said, just what its name is, the confirmation of what has already happened. So people that were baptized as babies or young people get confirmed. People that were baptized outside of the Episcopal Church and outside of having been confirmed by a bishop in apostolic succession get confirmed when they're in the Episcopal Church. So that would be people like Methodists, Presbyterians, any of the non-denominational evangelical churches. The churches that have apostolic succession in general are going to be Roman Catholicism, Eastern Orthodoxy, and some Lutheran churches. So if you were baptized and confirmed in one of those traditions, you would be received by the bishop rather than confirmed, because that's the church's acknowledgement that the sacramental rites of that church are valid and recognized by us. You don't have to get it redone like ours is better or different from ours.
Say that again. If you're confirmed in some of those churches, already a member, been baptized and all that, you're not confirmed into this one?
Right, you're received by the bishop.
And the idea of confirmation classes, how does that frame up? Because this was kind of you could claim this as a confirmation class, right?
Yeah.
Because it's learning about the church.
Right. So confirmation classes historically probably came about for kids and adolescents that were baptized as babies, and so they need to understand the faith and what they're getting into.
Okay.
Because part of confirmation, one of the directions for it is that it's the individual making a mature and public affirmation of his or her faith. So that's why we did classes for kids. That's why we do classes for people that are new to the Episcopal Church or adults that are going to be confirmed, just to give some grounding in the Episcopal expression of Christianity.
And I don't have the prayer book here, but there's a space in the prayer book in the back that has a series of questions that maybe,
Yeah, the catechism.
The catechism.
Yeah, the catechism is in the back. It's a traditional catechism of questions and answers. It was one of the old practices for teaching the faith.
Mm-hmm.
What is sin? Sin is blah, blah, blah. What are the sacraments? The sacraments are.
And was there a time when kids were quizzed on that? Because I remember in the Catholic Church, didn't you have to pass the test?
Yeah, so like when I was a kid, we got confirmed around age 13, 12, 13, 14, because that's the age you got confirmed. It didn't have anything to do with, there's something in me that wants to be confirmed, or I'm ready, or it didn't say, no, you're not ready. It was, you turn 13, you go to confirmation class. Confirmation class for me was mostly memorizing the Lord's Prayer, the Apostles' Creed, the Nicene Creed, the Ten Commandments, and some of the Catechism. Being able to recite that. And once I could do that and be confirmed, then I could start having communion.
Yeah. And just so that practice isn't all bad in that way, because it does set some things, gives you a foundation for.
It does.
And I kind of miss that. I miss that for my grandson in some respects, because I wonder what he does know, quite honestly.
Right. Yeah, But I think the shortcoming of that is memorization of the creeds and the prayers doesn't mean you know anything.
Yeah, right, right. But I, not to be, all that, I memorized a whole lot of Bible
Right.
early on in my life. And I wouldn't trade that for anything,
Yeah.
because
Oh,
that's written in my heart for the most part.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I think that's a necessary beginning point, it just ought not to be ending point.
Right.
Karen and I will need to be confirmed, because she was baptized in a Baptist church, I was baptized in a Methodist church. And, what do we need to do? What is that, is there anything we need to do? I don't mean spiritually prepared, but prepared for that? I mean, what do we need to do?
Just write a check, Bob.
You just keep writing, I'll tell you when. Yeah, no, really, at this point, nothing more. I'll let Maricela know. She may send you a form to fill out, just information form for the records. And then, when we get closer to the time of the bishop's visit, I write a letter to the bishop telling him everything we're gonna do, sending the liturgy for approval, and, telling him about baptisms and confirmations. On that Sunday, it's, Sunday the 15th, June 15th. The bishop will be here during the Sunday school hour. We'll probably have breakfast with the bishop, and then he'll talk to the congregation, and then he'll probably take 20 minutes or so to meet with the people that are being baptized or confirmed, separately, not individually, but as a group, just to talk to them about what you do in the class, how's it going, when you have questions for me. It's just kind of a meet the bishop in person time. It's not a test or anything like that.
But back to what Bob said, if we've both been confirmed in the Methodist church, then we're only received.
You'll be confirmed in the Episcopal Church, because Methodist bishops are not in apostolic succession.
I guess I don't know what that means.
There's an argument. There's an argument, and the Methodists don't make this a strong argument, but they do make this an argument that there is apostolic succession, and that's something that you're familiar with. But then there were some people in history, especially in the United States, that were saying, well, that really wasn't a bishop, and that person who appointed that supposed bishop really wasn't able to ordain him or whatever it was. So there were some arguments there. We don't need to get into arguments about how legitimate some of the popes were. That's
Or illegitimate.
But that's the Episcopalian rule. Catholics, Episcopalians, some Lutherans, Orthodox, that their confirmation, they got legitimate, even though you were baptized in the right way by immersion.
Right.
I was struggling with that. But it is, excuse me, I got to talking in my question, questions, but, yeah.
But there's ongoing dialogues with the Methodist Church about being in communion, where we would have a more formal recognition of one another's sacraments, liturgies, and validity of the rites.
So, Judy was baptized by immersion in the Baptist church. Before we got married, she had to get baptized in the Church of Christ by immersion, and then she got confirmed over at the Methodist church. So doesn't that count?
Third time's
Then who's the right person?
We won't rebaptize her. You'll
That story anytime, no such thing as rebaptism.
Well, I'm glad you outed Karen as a Baptist, because I'm sitting here thinking, that wasn't on the list that Mike ran off, so maybe I gotta start all over again.
Well, and they-
So
and they
you
don't-
would be confirmed, not baptized.
Yeah, they don't have, the Methodists actually, it's not necessarily accepted, and really, they don't really, you know, this isn't, they're not really far about it. The Methodists do have an apostolic succession tradition. I don't think the Baptists do, but the Methodists do have that tradition,
And certainly the
you know.
independent Baptist, don't.
Right, no, that's right. yeah.
Didn't it used to be the Methodist Episcopal? A Methodist Episcopal, it's hard to say.
Yeah, that's a separate branch.
Ah,
It was primarily an African-American branch. But yeah, the Methodist Episcopal Church.
That's still out there, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know what apostolic succession is.
So apostolic succession is if you take Jesus and you take the 12, right? And then they went out and they laid hands on so and so, giving them the teaching and the authority of the gospel to go and do the work, right? And so they all did their people, who knows how many there are. And then those people did it to more people, and those people did it to more people, so that it branches out, so that theoretically, every bishop in apostolic succession can trace his or her lineage back to one of the 12 apostles.
Okay.
And so it's in sacramental form, it's the tangible act of laying hands on the bishop, being consecrated, right? Within, what it means is that they have been given the grace and the power of the church through that succession to fulfill the role of bishop, to be the guardian and defender of the faith, to ordain and pastor the pastors.
And so the bottom line, I always think they don't recognize each other or something. As
Yeah, and
having
some
a link.
time, like Baptist, Church of Christ, they wouldn't be able to trace this back,
They're like,
and they probably wouldn't want to. They would say, yeah, we don't want to be any part of it. Right? They have a different understanding of their church organization. But, so for us, we would say part of what this is tradition with a capital T, right? It's the handing on of the faith to the next generations.
Yeah.
Right? The tradition with a capital T is the living faith of the dead. Traditionalism with a little t is the dead faith of the living. Right? So we get traditionalism and we say, well, that's how we've always done it. We've got to keep doing it that way. Tradition, in the big sense, is much more organic, more fluid, more alive. It allows for adaptation to current context and circumstances while holding the core truth of what's being passed on.
Isn't that one of the pillars of, in there 3 pillars of, is pillar the right word?
Yeah, scripture, tradition, and reason.
Yeah.
Yeah. They sometimes describe it as the 3-legged stool.
Yeah.
That's what we sit on.
So I'm watching all this because, guys, I had the same question when we came over. I got confirmed. One of the things that has really been exciting for me in this tradition is the understanding of community as a part of my faith. And so when I think Baptist and I think how I grew up, you know, it was more of an individual, you know, is Jesus your personal Savior? It was more personal. It was more kind of one-on-one. But it's been helpful for me to understand that without the community, my faith isn't full. That it takes the village to be a Christian.
Yeah, just for you, it takes a village.
Yeah, Mike can do it by himself.
Something that Mike said at one of the
And so that's where Protestantism and those different denominations kind of went separate way, right?
Yeah, and part of it is about how we see our polity or our governing structure.
Yeah.
Right, so you think about the Book of Common Prayer, remember we talked about common really meaning communal, shared community. Think about how communion for us is the primary act of worship. It's central in how we understand and know ourselves, how we live with one another. We may not like one another, we may not agree with one another, we may not believe the same things as each other, but when we come together, we share the same bread and the same cup. We offer the same prayers.
I have to say that growing up, Church of Christ is and there was nothing wrong with that, the way I was treated and taught and all that, and learned a lot, probably like Blaine's talking about. But the way they do communion, where they pass the plate or stuff like that, I never got that feeling of communal, it's the same, and until I got here, where everybody goes up at the altar there. That's the first time I've ever felt that. I know that's what we're supposed to be thinking every time we take communion, but I can't say that I did that.
Sure. I mean, this is probably an overstretch, but the imagery that comes to mind is it's the difference between everyone gathering and sitting at the table to eat supper together, or everyone getting their plate, filling it, and going wherever they want in the house to eat. There's a difference when we sit together and we share a meal. And to Blaine's point, so part of what that means is salvation, however you want to understand that, the healing and the wholeness that the church invites us into is never individual and unique to me. Right? My salvation depends upon you and yours upon me. That if we're not all gathered, if we're not all present, then we're somehow less than who we can truly be. So you can go back to the dinner table, right? I mean, Thanksgiving dinner with 8 of the family there is a beautiful and wonderful Thanksgiving, but if 2 or 3 are missing, you can still have a meal, it'll still be beautiful and wonderful, but there's something missing, right? And the more they are, the better it is. The more they are, the messier it gets, right? Because crazy Uncle Joe shows up, and Aunt Susie, and Cousin Billy, right?
Yeah, crazy Uncle George, yeah.
Yep. But they're part of the table as well, and we need to recognize that, because one day we'll be crazy Uncle.
It's,
Sometimes I am.
you know, when someone dies, a lot of people talk about, well, they're with so and so now, they're with Millie now, they're with,
Right.
and when it's that individual salvation mindset, I've had the issue of when I get to heaven, I gotta go find everybody. But in the communal mindset, everybody will be waiting for me. I kind of like that spin.
And Jesus said wherever 2 or more are gathered in my name. Right? He didn't
Yeah.
say when you're by
If 2 or
yourself.
3 are gathered, I'll be among them.
Yeah, that phrase, your personal Savior. Once I thought about that, that doesn't sound scriptural. It sounds self-serving.
Yeah. I've got Jesus, do you?
Yeah, that was it. And if you don't, we need to fix that. You need to fix that.
It's kind of like when I was still in business. If a guy, a salesman or whoever walked in and he had a little cross on his lapel, I started backing up. I was going to get taken. I don't know why it seemed like it always happened like that, but
Yeah.
that was a personal savior type thing, and they'll save you too.
I want to go back to the bishop apostolic succession just for one thing I was thinking about. So you may remember, know that yesterday, Angela Cortinas was consecrated a bishop in the church and bishop suffragan in this diocese. So she is 1,178th in the American succession of bishops.
There you go. Huh.
So she has her number.
She's got her number.
Who was number one?
Jesus.
Jesus, probably, they would count the 12 apostles is where they're counting back to.
That was gonna be my question. Did Jesus, in your mind, because he did in mine, lay his hands on each of the apostles and tell them to go out?
Yeah, I mean, they were sent, yeah, which is what apostles means in Greek. Apostolo means to be sent. So yeah, I mean, there was probably something he did to send them out.
Not all 12 had lineages. I mean, 11 had lineages, just 2 or 3.
Right, Judas gets replaced by
Some.
somebody, I don't remember.
I'm gonna make a public service announcement because I don't think many were here when all this showed up, but there's good eats back there now.
You mentioned in prayer. Am I jumping the gun here?
No,
Nope,
go.
wide open.
What I walked away with is that you make a tremendous effort to clear your mind, to be receptive. I've done that, I think maybe successfully, a couple of times in my life, but I'd like to do it more. And I don't know how to do it, because there's so much white noise out there. How do you do it?
It's just a practice. You just keep doing it. Right. So one of the ways that a lot of people find helpful, because you're not going to stop the thoughts from arising. Right. As long as we've got brain activity, thoughts, feelings, sensations are going to happen. Right. So you don't get to control that. You get to decide what you're going to do with them. Right. So if I'm sitting there and my calendar pops up and I think, oh, I got to do this. In that moment, I have a chance to decide, am I going to go work that out in my head? What am I going to do? Or do I just let it go? So that the sitting and the mindfulness is really, in some ways, it's just the practice of continually letting go. Right? That each thought comes up, let it go, let it go, let it go. It's for some people, what's helpful is to have a short word or mantra that they use. That's kind of Thomas Keating's teaching of what he calls centering prayer. So it may be, Lord have mercy. So what he teaches is you just keep repeating the mantra silently to yourself, Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy. So that it kind of focuses your mind, gives it something to do, but also as you continue to repeat that, it begins to sink deeper into you, and eventually you fall into silence, right? And he said, and when one of the thoughts comes up, you resume the mantra, Lord have mercy, until it calms you back down, and then you let it go. And that's the practice over and over.
The payoff for this, your thinking thing is going to be in a casket. And you, so whatever goes on, this meditation sort of prepares you for that idea, or however we can think.
Yeah, I think
Because
there's.
your brain's gonna be left here.
Yeah, I think it does. I think the other thing it teaches is how to be centered and carry that silence and stillness with us in the midst of our conversations and activities, so that the silence and stillness become an interior quality rather than an external circumstance. so that you can enter into conversation but still have a deep interior silence. You can be doing your everyday work but still feel the silence and the stillness within you. So that practice of letting go allows us to be detached and present at the same time. It helps us to let go of people, relations, and circumstances, not to disconnect from them, but to be more fully present to them.
The idea of nothing is terrifying. To you, Gordon.
Yeah, it is, but this isn't nihilism.
No, it's just non-thought.
Yeah, and the paradox is that in the silence, there's a presence.
Yeah.
Right? In the solitude, we're not alone and lonely.
Right.
Right? In the stillness, we're not just a passive rug on the floor. Right? That all of those create space and allow a greater experience of presence, mine to the divine and the divine to me.
I've achieved the quiet, but I haven't noticed the presence. So anyway.
But it may be more noticeable in its non-noticed form. Well,
Help me.
well, I mean, think about it. It's the fish in the water saying, "When do we get to the water?"
Okay.
Right? That's it. Right? It's not, I'm going to get silent. I'm going to wait for some big thing to happen, as if God, the big guy in the sky after, is going to do something and say, "Hey, Jim,
Yeah.
here I am." Woo!
Right.
Right. So because I think that's what we want. I think it's what we've often been told we got to get. But I don't think that's the thing. I think it's the ability to have that silence and that stillness and that solitude in the midst of life. Right. Friedman was a rabbi that really kind of, I think he's the guy that's talked about family systems theory. There was a guy before him, right? Who was that? Whatever his name is. Anyways, he talks about, you can make a difference in a relationship, in a family system, simply by being what he calls a non-anxious presence. If you can decrease your anxiety in the midst of whatever it is you're dealing with, it will ripple out and affect the whole system. Right? I mean, it's what I think good parents understand, that if they can calm themselves, the kid's going to be calm. If they're wound up and bouncing off the walls, so will the kid. Right? Put it at a larger level. The priest is all wound up and bouncing off the walls, so will the congregation. Right? We saw a lot of that through the disputes and the conflict about homosexuality.
There hadn't been a noticeable change in me trying to meditate, but other people's reactions to me, it's like
That's where it happens, right?
I remember early on in me, a long time ago, and starting to try to meditate. I remember one time Warren Seymour was out at the house, and I told him, I said, "I've been trying to meditate, Warren," and he said, "I can see that."
Yeah.
Yeah.
You notice it.
And one thing that Mike always said to me, and I think he says it a lot to everybody, is that helps. It's just showing up. It's like you want to show up and you want to make something happen because that's how we're taught. In this case, it's just showing up. It's just being there.
Presence is enough.
Yeah.
And we know that most of the time, right? I mean, you've had people that, were in need or something, you showed up in their life, you didn't do anything special or extraordinary, you didn't say anything, and at the end of the time, they said, "Oh, thank you, you made such a difference. I feel so much better." And it's like, well, what did I do? You showed up. And then most of the time, in this kind of more contemplative way of praying, I don't think usually that we experience a whole lot. The fruits of that prayer are seen in our relationships with others and how we handle circumstances. Right? The 20 or 30 minutes of formal sitting time, not much ever happens for me. Sometimes it passes fast, sometimes it's slow. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's really hard.
Try learning the blindfold iPad.
Would that be-
Yeah, yeah.
It's like,
I just come to the LASIK surgery and I'll be there.
it's like George's dad, Serenity Now.
What else?
In lifting up people in prayer, and I've got a long list, I'm sure everybody in this room has a long list. The older we get, the longer the list it's in, and we're just more aware. Some are prayers of thanksgiving, and some are prayers of true concern. I do it at the beginning of my prayer life, every day. Does anybody have any suggestion on how to lift people up? Do you create images, or do you just lift the concern up? Just be there, that's all.
What works for you?
It works for me best when I start with my prayers of thanksgiving. He is the great healer, the great physician. And then I say, we got more to do. I'm concerned. Dear Lord, I hope you, think if we're not, we're screwed. And I just didn't know if I were, that's what works for me. What works for you guys? That's what I'm asking.
What would you say?
But when you say works, you mean effective, you pray for somebody and they get well, because I pray for a lot of people and they die. What's work? What works personally, is that your question?
Yeah, what has authenticity and integrity? What feels right?
To Joe, when it's right.
Maybe totally different to you. I just don't know.
I want results, expect results.
My deal anymore is I let go of the results.
So you,
I let go of the results as best I can. You make an offer and let go of the results.
For me, it's become, so mine always starts out with silence. I used to feel bad that I didn't have a litany of people that I'm looking at and, heal them for their cancer. I quit that a long time ago. Just the acknowledgement of their name with nothing else around it, kind of, thy will be done to these people. And usually arises in there's peace in that. It's when I gave up trying to heal people by praying for them, that was a big relief for me. Because like Jim said, I'm not real optimistic about praying for people who've got terminal cancer. My experience is they die.
praying for rain, but if
Oh,
you
praying
ask-
for rain,
if you
yeah.
ask in my name, it shall be granted. What do you?
Yeah, I think we gotta rethink, what does that mean?
What do you think?
I don't think it's a transaction.
Yeah.
Sure. What is it?
I think it's, God asking us to be present and vulnerable and show up and express what we need. And I think, what does it mean that it should be done? I have no idea what that means. I prayed sometimes and got exactly what I wanted. I prayed sometimes and got more than I expected. I prayed sometimes and didn't get a thing. And someone recently asked me about, she was talking about her prayers, and she said, I have all these prayers for people, but if God knows everything, well, why am I doing that? Am I just telling God what God already knows? And so my thing on that is this, well, it's kind of like Cindy and me. I know she loves me, but I still like her to tell me. I know she has days that are hard and difficult, and I can't do a thing to change that or fix it for her. I want her to tell me. I think it's kind of similar to that. It's about the connection and the presence and the relationship and the honesty and the vulnerability and the intimacy. Those go a long ways in our lives to making a difference.
Can I give you an example?
Please.
Of a concern? I have a good friend whose son is suffering from long COVID. Young man, I knew him before COVID, and I've never been around anybody like him. Just, I mean, mentally, just so focused and in love with what he did. And now, totally lethargic. One thing and another, I was talking to his parents, and both of them were in tears, but for a reason that I had never heard of before. They were praying for him to die, to accept what he had, and he hadn't done it. And that's what they're concerned with. And I'd never even thought about that. You know, I'm praying for my child. He's got long COVID. I want him to have short COVID. I want him to get over it. You know, go back to the way I knew him, where I loved him. And it ain't happening in this particular case. And but I've never thought about that, just of dying to that. This is the way I'm going to be, and I need to accept it. And they're praying for him to accept that. And I still don't understand it completely. I'm still trying to process it.
Well, maybe there's a way in which the acceptance of it isn't resignation or giving up, but being able to get along with his life. You know, the desert mothers and fathers have lots of sayings about prayers, and they make this distinction. There's some of them that say, well, I prayed that, you know, this problem would be taken away, and almost always their Abba or Amma says, you stop that, right? You pray to have strength to deal with that, not that you don't have to deal with it. Right? They have a very different understanding of prayer. I think for many of us, we've been taught prayer is God's fix-it method. You pray, God's going to fix it. You need something, you pray, God will give it. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. And I don't know why or when those two things occur.
So a replacement for that transactional thing would just be showing up.
I think it is.
And you've done a lot of homilies and sermons around those healing passages, the blind man and the lepers and all those folks. And your spin 99 times out of 100 is it's not about, you know, receiving, it's not about curing my blindness, it's about a much bigger, you know, my blindness is not just in my eyes. My blindness is a metaphor for making life bigger and wholer, more
I
whole,
think that's right.
more whole.
Yeah, I mean, think about Lazarus. So Lazarus is dead. Woohoo! He gets resuscitated. He's alive. Everybody's happy. Right? So what's going to happen to Lazarus later?
He's gonna die.
He's going to die. In fact, the Jewish authorities are out to kill him. Right? I mean, the reality is, and this is part of a prayer of acceptance, I think, all of us got to deal with our own mortality, with our own limitations. And the degree to which we are scared of death, I think we are also scared to live. And our mortality isn't this kind of It's not this frame around, think about it, you could think about mortality as this frame around a painting. What's the frame intended to do?
Set it off,
Yeah,
show it off.
to give focus and say, look at this is what's important, right? But if the frame becomes too big, too gaudy, too attractive, we focus only on the frame and miss the beauty of the painting. And what if mortality is that frame around our life that says, pay attention to what it means to be alive. Don't take for granted a single minute. Live life to its fullest. Be curious, be adventurous, grow, explore, change, deepen. Whatever you do, do not fall asleep to your life. Do not sleepwalk through this world. Do not come to the end of your life and say, I was just a visitor or a tourist on earth. Be fully alive, participating residents of this beautiful and amazing world.
This happened in, I'm going back to your Wednesday, what was it?
The Tale of the Sands.
The Tale of the Sand, right. And the stream was trying to get across the sand, the desert. Were you here Wednesday? Anyway, so the stream was trying to get across the desert. And the stream finally realized it can't get across the desert. That on its own, as a stream, it took the desert and the clouds and everything else to get it across the desert. And that was so meaningful for me because it helped that mortality issue. That it really brought to light that mortality is what is, for me, what in that was resignation to the life around me. Life has not ended, it's changed.
Exactly what our liturgy says.
Yeah. And so those the long COVID or the cancer, someone's illness hopefully is not born alone, right? I often think that people who are terminal, we talk about how much longer they live than they needed to. To me, often that's for everybody around that person to get to a place to, be okay with that. So it's a communal process again, I think is what I'm trying to say. One of the things in my head, because you mentioned Keating, I think this was Keating's back to meditation, was helpful for me, was that meditation is going on a date with God. And I really like that because, and Mike's framed this up too, but you think about a new person that you wanted to start dating, there's all that excitement and everything. But it really gets good when you get to a place where you don't have to say anything to each other, and it's right. And for me, it's, meditation is shutting up. And when I really shut up, all of a sudden God's talking my you-know-what off.
What else? Good questions.
Well, we're all still scared of dying, but your frame around the picture is, don't sweat it, just live the picture.
Yeah, I think so.
I've got a brother that y'all know, and he was brought up the same way I was. And he totally rejects any sort of organized religion. He and I have talked about this kind of thing. But his theory is a little bit like you're talking about the picture, he is truly thankful for his life. And he's truly thankful for the people around him and stuff like that. And I have seen him, the other thing that I think you need to do is be aware of other people who have needs and try to meet as best you can those needs. And that's something he does. He does it with different organizations that help that. I've seen him, we had an aunt that was dying and before she died in Tulsa. He had the time to go. He went to Tulsa and was up there a month taking care of her, doing all the kind of stuff that you really don't like to do with people that are dying. So, you know, I'm not saying he's right, but I'm not faulting him either, because that's his his interpretation of what we need to be doing.
Right.
So,
He is a light, he has all the lights on.
Okay, you can feel it, you can sense that.
He walked in the room,
I-
but he doesn't.
So he's also a member of our Austin bunch, geologists and smart, brainy people, none of which have a deep faith that I'm aware of. But to a person almost, they are very faithful people.
Yeah, they may not have a deep Christian faith.
Exactly.
They've got a deep faith.
They got a deep faith.
I don't remember who it was. It may have been Augustine. Some old bishop said something like, the church has many that God does not. And God has many the church does not.
Amen.
yeah, I remember a close friend who died, who was not a churchgoer, and James Bermuda did the service. And the whole thing was, it's not so much that he know God, that God knows him.
Yeah, I think that's the question. What's more important, what you believe about God or what God believes about you? Maybe the grace and love of God are always bigger than anything we believe or don't believe.
That term unconditional love, you know, God is unconditional love. Well, if he's unconditional love, she's unconditional love, then why are some people loved and some people not loved? That doesn't fit. I don't get it.
My Uncle Maury defended public defender Madeline Murray O'Hare when she was thrown in jail. And he showed up, and the first thing she said was, "Thank God you're here."
Did he point that out?
Other thoughts, comments, questions?
You put a lot of effort into this. What would you like us to take away from all this?
Oh, you know, it's,
We appreciate the effort.
well, I mean, I like it. It's fun for me. I guess it's really, if it's made any difference, if you learn something, if you question something, if you started something new, if you quit something, it's changed. And I don't really, most of the time, I try not to have expectations of what you should get out of it and do with it. That's not for me. That's yours. It's between you and yourself and you and God. So I just try to be faithful to what I'm called to do and make an offering and let go of the rest of it.
You know, standing on outside looking in, it can seem really overwhelming in terms of structure and liturgy and all these multitude of pieces of stuff out there. But when it's put together and there's meaning attached to it, that's pretty neat. Because one of the things missing in some other places, in my mind, is that structure. I cannot, I'm just gonna say it, I have real problems with other people's funerals. When you go to a church and you sit around and all the stories are told and hoorah and they were a good person, that's great. But to me, that's a wake. You know, that's just having a toast to a good person, which do that for me, have a wake, get drunk in a skunk, but not here. But when you come here, the community is drawn in, and it's the saints of God gathering. And man, how powerful that is.
Well, this showed me nearly all the things that I questioned and wondered about. As many times, the different times I would come to the Episcopal Church for whatever, I would think, what are they doing? And why and stuff like that. It's kind of like I was over at Blaine's house one time we were recording this thing and I wasn't getting it right. And he said, "You've sang this 1,000 times." He said, "I've sang it no times." You know, you're thinking of, that's one thing that I regret in a way. Being Episcopal, I don't have the history that all these guys have. And all the people that I see in there, they know everything. You know,
No.
No, they know why they do this and they do it without things, stuff like that. I have to think through this stuff to be in the right place. And,
Yeah, the advantage of that is you have to think through it, right? You have to pay attention.
you know,
That when you know it and you've always known it and you've always done it, you can easily fall into going through the motions. And you can forget why you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
you need that bell again.
Yeah. Yeah.
There was a line given to me early on. We were just visiting over here, and Roy Glascock, Roy Glascock, but he never was a big Roy Glascock fan, but he did help me a whole lot because after holding all those books and that hymnal and singing those hymns that nobody knows and they sound horrible and they're just so strange to everything, he got up and he said, "You know, you really have to work to be an Episcopalian." And that made some sense. It really did.
Yeah, I mean, my liturgy professor used to say, if somebody new can come into the church and immediately know what's going on and join in, something's not right. You're not having a very deep conversation. He said the conversation we've been having has been going on for more than 2,000 years.
Yeah.
They ought to feel lost when they get there, and you ought to help them. But the deep conversations, you can't just jump in. Superficial cocktail conversations, yeah, we can talk about the weather, the team, the rain, the family. That's easy. We bounce in and out of those. But the deep conversations about faith and joy and the tragedy of loss and the sorrows and broken dreams and recovery of life, those take a while to get to. And it's not about understanding them. Anselm was one of the great Anglican bishops. He said it's faith seeking understanding. So we have the experience and then we try to put understanding to it. You can't understand it and then go experience it. I mean, part of the reason the class is making sense, my guess is, because you've sat in the liturgy, you've experienced it. Now you're putting some things together for yourself. If you never
I
sat
took
in-
this class a year ago, very similar
Right.
class, but I'm understanding much more now.
I've taken it for 20 years. And I'm like you, I still don't get along.
Well, we had a conversation last week about vocation, and, I spent 3 years in my graduate studies being a guidance counselor, vocational counselor, and no one ever mentioned that it's faith-based. So anyway, that was just a revelation that I had.
Yeah, I mean, when I was in high school, vocation was for the kids that were going to college.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. church, thank you very much. Good to be with you all, appreciate your wisdom.
Thank you very much.
Next week, nothing, or this week?
No, next week, the book.
What's his last name?
Nowen, Nouwen. Henry Nouwen, Reaching Out.
And be careful when you go to Amazon, he's very prolific
Yeah.
writer. There's about 30
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I picked the wrong
Oh,
one. It just happened.
Where did he be?
Feeding,
Goat hair and everything.
feeding.
Oh, well, looks all
We
good.
can't break the stream. We keep on to feeding. Yes. Another 200 round bales.
Wow. I don't know how you make that pencil out.
It will, that's the thing, on this market, it will, unbelievable.
Drought insurance and all that technical stuff.
Well, you can do that with a hedge, it's a hedge, but I've never seen a market sustain itself this long.
Through the.
And it's getting bigger, I mean, it's getting higher, it's just more aggressive. I don't know where the cattle are going, I don't have a clue. All I know is that we're trying just hanging on by a family, and it may be the wrong thing. You can't run from it.
I talked to Jimmy Connors yesterday, he said farming here is over and it's gonna be replaced by grazing,
Good.
pigs and grazing